good to see everyone here today. Real good crowd. I appreciate everyone's attendance, and I'm sure God is pleased as well. You know, the Bible's full of all kinds of warnings for us, things that we need to be aware of, we need to watch out for and look out for, and not fall into their traps. And this morning is one of those lessons I would like to give in regards to gaining the whole world, or that of gambling. While I've been recuperating from my surgery, I was in a lot of pain. And you know, when you're in a lot of pain, there's not a lot of things that you can dwell on. And so I'd watch a lot of TV, get some old movies, and try to get my mind thought off of the pain in my foot and get it on something else where I could bear and go get through the day. And I was amazed at the commercials that I'd seen for gambling. They make it look so good and so pleasant, and just everybody wins, so to speak. And that just isn't the case at all. I mean, some of these sites I saw that they say, you know, we'll deposit into your bank account. You just give us your bank information, and we can put the money right into your bank account, and you can have it immediately. Now, who would fall for something like that? They make it sound so good and so easy. And yet the Bible talks so much about it, the evils of gambling. They try to gain the whole world, well, as much as they can anyway, and that's their ambition for many people in this life. They think just one more lucky roll of the dice, one more spin of the wheel, or just one more good card, and everything I've ever wanted and hoped for can be mine. So they think. And it's this desire for everything that life has to offer is what drives these many people to their dooms. Men, women, young and old, poor and rich, but mostly the poor. Those that don't have much as far as worldly goods. They dream for one day that they'll strike it rich, and they live for that day. You know, this isn't a modern phenomena, something that just come about in recent years. People have been gambling for centuries, even millennials, trying to strike it rich in one fair swoop. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 65, in Isaiah 65, this is 700 years before Christ came to earth. Isaiah deals with this idea of gambling. In Isaiah chapter 65, notice in verses 11 and 12. Isaiah 65, begin in verse 11. He says, "But you are those who forsake the Lord, who forget my holy mountain, who prepare a table of fortune, and who furnish a drink offering to Menai. Therefore I will remember you for the sword, and you shall bow down unto the slaughter. Because when I called you, you did not answer. When I spoke to you, you did not hear, but did evil before my eyes, and I chose that in which I do not delight." Isaiah talks about a table of fortune, a table of chance. Many scholars look to that as we look at today as a table for gambling. Even back in those days, men sought their fortunes by games of chance. A little money down in the hopes of winning more, a lot more, of fortune. Well, some call gambling just an innocent form of entertainment. Nobody gets hurt. It's just innocent. But let me tell you, gambling destroys everything that it touches. Some call gambling an important source of revenue for a worthy cause. It's a good way, a decent way to raise some money for a good cause. Oh, but the destruction that it encourages. To individuals, to societies, to individual homes within that society. It destroys the very core of everyone it touches. They call it innocent and decent, and it is neither. Various churches and clubs and charitable organizations, they hold raffles and fundraisers for money for their various causes. Oh, they may be worthy causes, needful projects that benefit many, and they'll give people a chance to help someone else that they may not have had an opportunity to before, and maybe even help yourself, they say. So they justify what they're doing because it's helping a needy cause. Maybe it's a new church building. Their building is dilapidated and they need funds to supply to have a new church building. And so they hold raffles and all kinds of other things to fund that endeavor. Just pay $5 down, you could win $500. Or put $100 down, you could win thousands of dollars. Or maybe it's a missionary work. They need money for schools and hospitals in undeveloped countries. And you can participate in that by your money. Just give us a few of your dollars, and you might even win some money on top of that. I remember when Michigan was trying to get the lottery in our state, and they said it would be good for the schools. The money will go totally to the school fund. Any money that's not given out in prizes will be given to our school fund to support our schools, and our schools should be great. How are they now, though? What did they promise and what did they deliver? Some of these are worthy causes, no doubt, but they promote evil under the disguise of good works. They fuel the fire of wickedness that some good might come from it. After all, they say, if it's a church organization that's promoting this, it must be good. But nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, Paul speaks of this hypocrisy in Romans chapter 3. Notice in Romans chapter 3, verses 7 and 8. Let's just do this little wickedness. I mean, it's a little bad, some may admit. But look at the good it's going to do. Notice Romans chapter 3 and begin in verse 7. Paul writes, "For the truth of God hath more abounded through my lie unto his glory. Why yet am I also judged as a sinner? And not rather, as we slanderously reported, and as some have affirmed that we say, let us do evil that good may come, whose damnation is just." And this is what they do. They claim, we can do a little bit of evil, but look at the good that it's going to do. The good outweighs the bad. Paul says there shouldn't be none of that. He says, never do evil that good may abound. The problem is with all these organizations, these churches, they don't look at these games of chances as they're doing any harm to anybody. Rather, they look at all the good that comes from it. They're doing a good deed, and this simply is not true. They're causing more harm to society than they are willing to admit. Well, this morning I'd like to look at some of these evils of gambling. To look at what is so wrong with gambling. Number one, I'd like to propose to you that it's a sin. It's sinful to gamble. In 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 10, notice what Peter talks. Doesn't specifically mention gambling, but the concept, the principle is there. In 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 10, notice what he writes. He says, "As every man hath received the gift, even so minister the same one to another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God." Peter says we are to be good stewards of what God has given us. Do you think God would be pleased with us with supporting these gambling halls, these casinos, with our money and all the other evils that go along there? Do you think God will look at that as being good stewards of what He has given us? Is helping casinos and gambling facilities our worthy ambitions, really? Something worthy to support? Would God be pleased with us using our money to support such establishments? Do you remember in Isaiah chapter 65, the verse we just read in verse 12? He talked about those tables of fortunes and the drink offerings to the foreign gods. He says, "I called you," God says, "I called you, but you did not answer. When I spoke to you, you heard me not. But you did evil before my eyes and chose things that I do not delight in." And if you go down in Isaiah 65 and a few more verses in verse 15, Paul says, Isaiah writes, God says, "I will slay you for this evil and wickedness that you do." Using our money on games of chance instead of providing the good things and necessary things is wrong. You see, it's all about the love of money. People love money and they love to get as much as they can. Notice in 1 Timothy chapter 6 what Paul wrote to young Timothy about this idea here. About people that love money so much that they'll play these games of chance in an effort to get more, to get a lot more. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, notice in verses 9 and 10. He writes, "But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith, pierced them through with many sorrows." We see here Paul writes about these people, what they do. These people that have this love of money, they got to get more and as much as they can. Notice what Paul says it does for them. It destroys their faith. They err from the faith and they pierce themselves through with many sorrows. He says people that do these things, they do many foolish and harmful things. Not harmless things, but harmful things. Things that harm our bodies. These people that desire to be rich in the form of gambling. God says, and Paul says, and Peter says, to stay away from it. It's evil. Not only that, gambling promotes laziness and kills the desire for work. You ever notice somebody that's really hooked into gambling? I'm sorry. Got ahead of myself. Point number 2, it encourages dishonesty and deceit. You see, more people lose than win. And the more people lose, the more money the casinos and the people that are promoting these games make. They realize you can get more money by people losing, so they fix things a little bit, tamper with the machines to try to get more people to lose so they can have more money. I mean, that's no secret. Casinos are being exposed more and more for their proven acts of cheating. And they just keep doing it, figuring they won't get caught. But that's how they make their money, when people lose. I remember when I worked at General Motors, I worked with guys that were gamblers. They would tell me about how machines, this one certain machine, they'll go there every week when they go there, and they'll go to this specific machine because this machine always gives out. They see they see a whole bunch of people winning at this particular machine and none at the other machines. So don't tell me they don't cheat. And because of their cheating, people are getting rich. Kurt Kevorkian, the owner of MGM Grand Resorts, which include the casinos and the resorts and the bars and things like that, his net worth is $4.2 billion with a B. Caesars Entertainment Group, that owns all the Caesars casinos, their net worth is $24.32 billion. That's with a B. Because you see, the more people don't win, the more richer these casinos get. And they make it harder and harder to win. And when people lose, they get in dire straits. They begin to deceive members of their family, lie about funds that they've taken. They hide things from them in order to conceal their losing way. They get ashamed of it, and the only way out is to lie about it, to deceive their families and friends. In Ephesians chapter 4, do you remember what Paul wrote to the brethren there? He says, we put on this new man. He says, we've gotten rid of the old man and put on the new man. And this new man, notice what he says this new man is like. He says, and you that put on the newer man, which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness, wherefore put away lying and speak every man truth to his neighbors, for we are members one of another. We're not to be lying. We're to be truthful to one another. In Proverbs chapter 6, Proverbs has a lot to say about this idea of deceitful behavior, deceiving people and lying to people. In Proverbs chapter 6, notice verses 16 and 17. He says, these 6 things the Lord hates, yes, 7 are abomination to him. A proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. God hates lying. But yet people who are trapped in this ordeal of gambling, they think they have no other choice. And so they lie and they deceive. Notice in Psalm 101, 101st Psalm. And notice verse 7. Psalm 101, verse 7. It says, "He who works deceit shall not dwell within my house. He who tells lies shall not continue in my presence." This is speaking of God. God said, "Those that work deceit will not live in my house. I'm not pleased with them." But gambling only encourages people to deceive and to lie. They feel they have no other choice than to do that. Thirdly, I'd like to present to you that gambling promotes laziness and the desire for work. God in 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 8 told Paul that we are to work to provide for our families, to work a job. That's a good thing to do. Work to provide for your families. And he says if those that don't do that are worse than an infidel. You're worse than an unbeliever if you will not do that. 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 8. He says, "But if any provide not for his own, especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel." You see, people that gamble, they're looking for that one day. Today's the day, they're thinking. I'm going to strike it rich. I'm going to hit that lucky number. And I won't have to work anymore. And so they don't. They wait around to hit that jackpot that never comes. Today will be the day, they say. The day never comes, and they waste day after day, year after year. Paul wrote to the brethren at Thessalonica in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 and verse 10 says, "If a man doesn't work, neither shall he eat." Working is a good profession that God has provided for mankind. We are to work for what we need. But those who have a habit of gambling do not work or work as little as possible. They're thinking, why bother? Because I'm just going to strike it rich someday. Any day now, I can just feel it. But that day never comes. And they sit and wait, hoping that for that day, and they become lazy with no desire to work. Not only that, gambling promotes idolatry. I used to work, before I became a Christian, at the KFC Hall over on Van Born Road. And I used to set up tables and chairs for events, weddings and parties, and every week we'd set up for the bingo night. And we'd set up the tables, and the old ladies would come. And they would get their bingo cards out, and then they would open their purse and bring out all their little trinkets. And they'd set them up in front of their table. They'd grab them and they would rub them. This is going to be my lucky day. Yeah, you'll be good for me. And they say something to this one here. And they won't play without those trinkets. I've seen it week after week after week. People put their hope, all their hope in these little statues and these little trinkets that they put out before them. Some are even religious relics. Some patron saint of something that we're going to help them to get some money today. They put their hope and trust more in these than they do God. It's as if these pieces of metal and wood and plastic would affect these little ping pong balls that are being twisted around in a cage. And that somehow this little trinket is going to direct the guy's hand or the lady's hand when she reaches in and pulls out that ping pong ball with their number on it. It's preposterous, but they believe. And they won't play the game without those trinkets set before them. And we all know how God feels about idolatry. In Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 5, when God was giving Moses and the children of Israel what we commonly know as the 10 Commandments. There were many more commandments, but we look at 10 of these that he has placed before them. Remember what the first one was? And how God felt about this? In Exodus chapter 20 and verse 1, he says, "And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or is in earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Verse 5, you shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me. God says you bow down to these idols. He says you hate me. And he says, and God is strictly telling them, you shall not do that. If you're going to be a child of mine, you must not bow down to these images. You must not create these images, nor give them the honor and glory that is due me. And what about John in 1 John chapter 5? John here is writing this book, this letter to these brethren about what it means to be in fellowship with God. You want to be in fellowship with God. You want to be pleasing to God. Listen to what I have to say. And in 1 John chapter 5, as he closes out his book, this letter, notice what he writes. He says, little children, keep yourselves from idols. Amen. Gambling, not only of all the other evils it does, it promotes idolatry. It promotes people to worship these worthless idols that they set before them. But probably the most damage that gambling does to an individual is that it's addictive and it enslaves people. It's got its grip on them and they will not let go. Gambling is an addictive force. Everyone agrees with that. Nobody denies that. Nobody denies that it's addictive. And when it gets hold on people, it will not let go. And it completely takes over their lives. And they know that. Yet it continues on. When people that are addicted to it, everything in their life revolves around this habit of theirs. What numbers came up in the lottery today? Am I going to be happy or am I going to be sad? And they think of nothing else, hoping that today will be the day that they win. And they keep hoping until they're financially, emotionally, and spiritually ruined. Even Gamblers Anonymous, a group that's dedicated to reforming these gambling addicts, those that have ruined their lives by this gambling habit. They have no family left, no friends, on the verge of suicide. They have no hope in life anymore, and they turn to this group for help. They have no one else to turn to. And in their treatment of these individuals, 100% of everyone they talk to who've let gambling get control of their lives, every one of them tell the story of how they got involved in gambling. Oh, there's some innocent little gesture, so they think. Maybe it was a football pool at work, $5 a week. Put $5 down on the game this weekend, and you could win $50. Well, then the playoffs come. Now, just pay $10. You could win $500 for just $10 bet. And then the Super Bowl comes. Just $100. And you could win tens of thousands of dollars. But oh, it's just for a while. It's just for the football season. Well, then hockey starts and basketball comes along and then baseball. And pretty soon, they're hooked. And what about, they talk about, oh, I bought a raffle ticket at church. What was wrong with that? They were offering, it was for a good cause. I gave $5 and I won. I won $250. And then something bigger comes along. Wow, I was lucky back there at church. Maybe I'll be lucky with this too. And so they bet some more money. They bet some more money. And they lose. Just a raffle ticket at church got them started. That $5 football pool at work. Pretty soon they're hooked and they cannot stop. You see, gamblers never look back at what they lost. They're always looking forward to the next gamble, the next game of chance. Today is going to be my day. Today is going to be the day I hit that jackpot. Till they realize they have nothing left to wager with. Their money is all gone. That money they'd been set aside for retirement or for a vacation trip or college for their children. They figured, I'll just borrow it for now and I'll pay it back when I win. I won't pay that bill this week because I'm going to win Sunday and I know it. I can pay it all back next week. But they don't win. And the debts keep piling and piling up. The hole gets deeper and deeper, and they can't get out of it. It's too deep, and their life is ruined. Every single person who lived a life of gambling and been so addicted to it tell a similar story. They believe it won't happen to me, but it does, because it's addicting. It gets a hold of people and hangs on. The more you engage in it, the more you want. And if you're not winning, the worse it gets for you. These games are not designed for people to win. They're betting on you that you will lose because they know you will, and they will benefit from it. They don't care how bad your life gets. They're only worried about their own, and they want all the money that they can get. As all these casinos begin to pop up everywhere, now we begin to see signs and advertisements on billboards, gamble responsibly. What does that mean? What does that mean to someone who's addicted? It's like telling an alcoholic, drink responsibly. In other words, don't drink. They're addicted to it. They're going to do it. The only way they're going to stop is by their own thing. Gamble responsibly. What a joke. Here they entice you all that they can to get all the money that they can. And then they tell you to gamble responsibly. As Christians, we need to stay away from every form of gambling. There is no innocent way to gamble. It's all bad and it's all evil. It's a tool of Satan he uses to destroy us. And it seems to be getting more and more popular even today. You look at the TV advertisements. Everybody's having fun. It's a great old time. We're laughing. We're having fun. They're flashing money around like everybody's winning. They make it sound so good. Why don't they show the images of those who've been destroyed their lives by gambling? Those that didn't win. Those that are laying out in the gutters in the street because they have no place to go. Their family has done away with them. They have no home. Why don't they show pictures of them? Oh, they show pictures of the people that win these great lotteries and things and all the money they make. Why don't they show pictures of them years later when all that money is gone? They've ruined their families. They have no friends. They have nothing left in life. But yet all they want you to see is the fun and the good. They don't show the other flip side of that coin. And there's more on that back flip side than there is of the other. People on the verge of committing suicide, that's all they have left. Their life is in shambles. Why don't we see more of this? They just want us to focus on the winning. I want us to listen to the Apostle Paul this morning. How we can avoid such things as falling into this temptation. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, notice in verse 12. Paul writes, all things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. Paul says, I will not allow anything addictive into my body, into my brain or into my body. He says, I won't allow it. I know there's some good things that may be addictive. He says, I'm not going to deal with them. I'm not going to allow them into my body, into my life. I'm going to avoid those things. He told the Galatian brethren in Galatians chapter 5 and verse 23, he's talking about the fruit of the Spirit. If the Spirit of God is living within you, what does he tell them in verse 23? That person has self-control. Paul says that's what we need to have as Christians. We can't allow things to be addictive to enter into our lives. We've got to stay away from these things that we know are bad for us. These things that are addictive and lead us into evil. I know some may be thinking, but there's a loophole in the Bible. I invite your attention to Acts chapter 1. The disciples of Jesus gambled. Why can't I? Is there some double standard here? That was okay for them, but not for me? And they always turn to Acts chapter 1. Well, let's go to Acts chapter 1. And let's look at what happened. In Acts chapter 1, notice in verses 23 through 26. Here they are choosing men to be appointed as the next apostle to take Judas's place. And verse 23, and they appointed two, Joseph called Barsabbas, who was named Justus, and Matthias. And they prayed and they said, Thou, Lord, which knowest the hearts of all men, show whether of these two thou hast chosen. And he may take part of this ministry and apostleship from which Judas by transgression fell, that he may go to his own place. And they gave forth the lots, and the lot fell upon Matthias, and he was numbered with the 11 apostles. They always go to this verse to justify their own gambling addiction. The disciples of Jesus gambled, I can too. But what happened here? Were they gambling for money? Did they cast those lots so that they could have some money, see who's going to win the pot, so to speak? They wanted to know God's choice in this matter. They were leaving it up to God, and God chose Matthias. It's quite different than spinning a wheel and getting money if we choose right. In Proverbs chapter 16, Solomon explains this concept as well. In Proverbs chapter 16, he explains what these casting of lots, these people were doing in these days. Proverbs chapter 16, notice in verse 33. It says, The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. They were casting lots to see how God would choose. God, what is your choice? They weren't casting lots to get money, playing games of chance, ruining their lives for the sake of just getting a little more money. No, Acts 11 proves nothing in regards to our gambling. Let me close with a passage in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 21 and 22. Paul told the brethren at Thessalonica, Prove all things, hold fast to that which is good, and abstain from all appearance of evil. Gambling is bad. It's evil. There is nothing good about it. God abhors it and warns us to stay away from it. There are many people today that are gambling in a more serious way, where the stakes are much higher. They're gambling with their soul. They think they have more time. I don't have to obey the gospel today. I've got plenty of time. So they put it off. The sad part is some people gamble and lose. They lose their eternal soul. Don't be like them. Don't put it off anymore. You may never have another opportunity than right now, today, to obey the gospel. Gambling for money is bad, but gambling with your soul is even worse. You're talking about eternal joy versus eternal damnation. And I ask, which will it be for you? Don't put it off another day. Tomorrow may never come. We may never have another opportunity to be saved. Why won't you do it today, right now, while we stand and sing for your encouragement?